I need you to fix that light bulb. You've used the ladder before, right?
But I've been watching wrestling since the year 2000. I'm pretty sure I know how to climb a ladder.
Okay, just be quick about it because I've got a video to record.
You go record that. I've got this.
No, don't go down. I'm going to record the video. My mama always told me, Ollie, life is like a ladder match. Sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down. And sometimes, even when you reach the very top, actually, life had nothing for you and you fall even lower down the card than you were before. Money in the Bank is WWE's greatest match invention since the Royal Rumble. Not only is it a thrilling ladder match, it also sets up a shocking cash-in future moment. But those literal highs can distract you from the gimmick's cursed history and how its failures, sometimes from bad luck, but mostly from bad creative, have ruined more careers than it's made. I'm Oli Davis, and this is the cursed history of WWE's Money in the Bank. Money, 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 money. The WrestleMania years, 2005 to 2009. Like penicillin, the creation of Money in the Bank was an accident. In the build to WrestleMania 21, Chris Jericho realised him, Edge, Chris Benoit, Kane, Rob Van Dam and Shelton Benjamin didn't have a high-profile match for the biggest show of the year. There had been some talk of a three-way submission match between him, Edge and Benoit, but Jericho thought that sounded dull, so he pitched something else. A six-way ladder match with all the aforementioned directionless names. Because of how the match was introduced in storyline, which was Jericho pitching the idea to then Raw General Manager Eric Bischoff, some people think Y2J was wholly responsible for the concept, but in truth, he co-created the gimmick with longtime WWE writer Brian Gewirtz. Gewirtz had already been thinking of a similar multi-man idea, but based around a high-stakes reward he called the Hollywood Dream Match, as WrestleMania was in Los Angeles that year. The winner would get a dream of their choice come true, which Gewirtz was going to give to Rob Van Dam, who would pick the revival of ECW. This was to give a storyline reason for why WWE would be hosting the One Night Stand pay-per-view that summer, which they were already planning to do after the success of the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD the previous year. Jericho and Gewirtz took their Hollywood Dream ladder match to Vince McMahon, who said the prizes parameters were too vague. What if someone's dream was that they were automatically made WWE champion, or that they now owned WWE? Jericho suggested the winner could get a title shot on the Raw after Mania, which Gewirtz tweeted to create the most exciting part of the gimmick. The winner would get a title shot at a time and place of their choosing over the next year. Vince loved it, but insisted on one more detail. The contract for the winner should be stored in a briefcase, which meant the holder could carry it around and use it as an ever-present Chekhov's gun weapon. The first ever Money in the Bank match was added to Mania's creative plans. RVD suffered a knee injury in January, so Christian took his place, and the match itself was won by his former tag partner Edge in an instant classic, a mid-carder on the rise who didn't even want to be there, as Adam Copeland himself later recalled. When they first told me that I'd be in this thing called the Money in the Bank match, I said, another ladder match? I don't want to be the ladder match guy. I want to do more than that. I want a straight wrestling match where I can just get in there and go. I actually said, don't put me in, I'll find my way on WrestleMania another way, and if I'm not on this year, I'll make sure I'm on next year. But I'm tired of ladder matches, I don't want to get pigeonholed for that. That was not very bright thinking. This coincided with a bit of good fortune for Edge and terrible fortune for Matt Hardy. Just a few days after Edge became Money in the Bank's first ever briefcase winner, reports emerged that he had been having a real-life affair with Hardy's girlfriend Lita, which, in a rather unfair turn of events, got Hardy released from his contract. Edge's heel act with Lita and his feud with Hardy made him one of the most hated heels in the company, capped by Money in the Bank's first ever cash-in at 2006's New Year's Revolution. A bloody John Cena had just narrowly retained the WWE Championship in the Elimination Chamber when Vince McMahon announced Edge would be cashing in his contract. 2 spears later, and the rated R superstar had won the top title for the first time. While that title reign was short-lived, Edge dropped the belt back to Cena at the Royal Rumble. That moment and the live sex celebration with Lita on the following night's Raw cemented him as a main eventer. Thanks to a mix of luck, reactive booking, and creativity, the Money in the Bank stipulation excelled in every respect on its first go. A great ladder match, a shocking cash-in, and a genuine elevation of a new star. Unfortunately, we wouldn't get that again for about 9 years. The second Money in the Bank match at WrestleMania 22 wasn't as stacked as the inaugural lineup, where Rob Van Dam beat Bobby Lashley, Finlay, Matt Hardy, Shelton Benjamin, and, weirdly, Ric Flair. Unfortunately, RVD didn't get the originally planned Hollywood Dream Prize because he could have wished for WWE's ECW revival to be actually good.
Oh, you should go watch my video on who really killed WWE ECW. There's a link for it in the video description down below.
Climb the ladder faster! Unlike the heelish opportunism of Edge, the babyface RVD announced in advance where and when he would cash in his shot. At the second ECW One Night Stand, he would challenge Cena for the WWE Championship. RVD beat him, thanks to interference from Edge, and then got arrested. Just 20 days after his title win, RVD and Sabu were stopped by a traffic cop who found them in possession of marijuana and prescription drugs. Both were arrested, and RVD was booked to drop both the WWE and ECW titles 2 weeks later before being suspended for 30 days. At least Rob got to actually cash in. Mr. Kennedy was even more unlucky, beating CM Punk, Randy Orton, Finlay, Edge, King Booker, Matt Hardy, and Jeff Hardy in an excellent match, the first 8-man one so far. McMahon was a huge fan of Kennedy's character, and the briefcase win was about to push him into the main event scene. He declared he would hold on to the briefcase until the next year's WrestleMania, which was the real backstage plan, until The Undertaker got hurt the following month. As he was the reigning World Heavyweight Champion, Kennedy was told he'd cash in on the dead man instead, but just days after being told this, Kennedy got injured from a Batista clothesline on a house show. An MRI showed he had torn his tricep muscle off the bone, which would need surgery and put him out for 7 to 8 months. Stephanie McMahon told Kennedy they still needed to get the belt off Taker though, so they booked Kennedy vs. Edge with the briefcase on the line for the 7th of May episode of Raw, which Kennedy lost. Edge cashed in on Taker on that same week's SmackDown, becoming the first 2-time casher-inner. The problem was, Kennedy wasn't actually injured. A second MRI the day after he'd lost the briefcase revealed he'd only suffered some popped blood vessels, gross, which he'd heal from in 5 to 6 weeks. Kennedy never reached those heights again, and Edge had to forfeit the belt 2 months later because he got injured too. The fourth winner of WrestleMania 24 was different though. He didn't do drugs, so there was no chance of an arrest. He was a young up-and-comer, so the risk of injury was lower. The only thing that could derail him would be if his behaviour got him heat backstage. Oh crap, it's CM Punk. After being one of the few bright spots in WWECW, Punk got a huge push winning Money in the Bank, getting drafted to Raw in June and then cashing it in for the World Heavyweight Championship on his first night on the brand on, you guessed it, it's Edge again. Punk would only hold the title for 69 days though. Nice. Losing it in one of the most infuriating ways possible. Randy Orton punted him in the head backstage at Unforgiven, so WWE had him forfeit the belt that night. Bruce Pritchard would later recall that Punk didn't have many supporters backstage, but he had enough to become the only person to ever win the Money in the Bank match back-to-back. I'm not counting Carmella there, as he also unhooked the briefcase at WrestleMania 25. This time was a much bigger success though, as it led to Punk's first great run in WWE, a slow burn heel turn when he cashed in on Jeff Hardy at June's Extreme Rules, who had only just won the World Heavyweight title from, guess who? Edge again, in a ladder match. A few months later, Punk debuted his heel straight edge character from the Indies, going on to form the Straight Edge Society. While Punk was shaving heads and making Rey Mysterio's daughter cry though, the next great innovation in wrestling stipulations was happening. Gimmicks. Gimmicks everywhere. In early 2009, after running a poll on their website, WWE decided to rename their October No Mercy event to Hell in a Cell. Armageddon soon became TLC, and February's No Way Out was rebranded Elimination Chamber. Even Fatal 4-Way got its own show. In February 2010, high on gimmick-themed events, WWE announced that July's Night of Champions would now be called Money in the Bank. Like the Royal Rumble before it, the gimmick had become so successful it got its own pay-per-view. It meant the Money in the Bank match at that year's WrestleMania, though, felt like an administrative afterthought. The unprecedented 10-person lineup was crammed with mid-carders like Evan Bourne, MVP, and its ultimate winner, Jack Swagger. He cashed in on Jericho for the World Heavyweight title on the SmackDown after Mania, likely because WWE needed to get rid of the briefcase before July's Money in the Bank, and went on to have a largely forgettable 3-month reign and never became champion again. The oversaturated pay-per-view era, 2010 to 2014. Thanks to the success of TNA Lockdown, wrestling in the early teens became a time of stipulation spamming.
Oh, did someone say TNA? I love TNA.
Luke, can you please change that bulb? Why's Tempest got a ladder too?
TNA! TNA! TNA!
So the first ever Money in the Bank pay-per-view featured 2 Money in the Bank matches, which were also WWE's second and third in 4 months with Swagger's win at Mania. WWE would put on a total of 9 Money in the Bank matches over the next 4 years. From 05 to 09, they only had 5. But it wasn't just oversaturation that was making the briefcase feel less important. The contract no longer meant you could cash in on any title. It was now championship specific. The World Heavyweight Championship briefcase could only be cashed in on the World Heavyweight Championship. The WWE title briefcase could only be cashed in on the WWE title. The gimmick's famed unpredictability had become 50% more predictable. Kane uninspiringly won the 2010 SmackDown match in the show's opener, later becoming the first person to cash in on the same night he won, pinning Rey Mysterio just 50 minutes after unhooking the briefcase. And The Miz won the Raw match, eventually cashing in on Randy Orton that November to win his first WWE Championship, a run that would somehow lead to him beating John Cena in the main event of WrestleMania 27. Thanks to the following year's show coinciding with one of the hottest angles WWE had ever done, CM Punk's post-pipe bomb match against John Cena in Chicago, the Money in the Bank pay-per-view cemented itself as one of WWE's Big 4 events, leapfrogging Survivor Series in terms of importance, which Vince was considering scrapping altogether. The 2011 show also saw fan-pleasing wins for Alberto Del Rio in the Raw match, we liked him at the time, and Daniel Bryan unhooking the SmackDown briefcase. Bryan, a babyface, would declare he'd cash in at the following year's WrestleMania, but cashed in on Mark Henry in November instead. Kind of. Teddy Long declared Henry wasn't medically cleared to compete because of a Big Show KO punch, which happens all the time, so the result was voided. Bryan successfully cashed in on Big Show instead. WWE quickly struggled booking 2 good cash-in storylines a year, and the briefcase was becoming a crutch. The following year's winner, Dolph Ziggler, unnecessarily defended his contract twice, and despite my personal favourite cash-in of all time, when Ziggler beat Del Rio on the Raw after Mania 29, WWE booked him to lose it back to Alberto in his first title defence, after a concussion had kept Dolph off TV. In WWE's defence though, how can you elevate these Money in the Bank winners if they keep losing all the time? Oh yeah, you're in control of that too! During the 2010s, WWE would consistently book wrestlers to go on a losing streak after winning the briefcase. I guess the idea was to make the eventual title shot a surprise, but it mostly weakened them as credible champions when they actually cashed in. Bryan lost 55% of his matches when he had the briefcase. Ziggler lost 62%. Damien Sandow lost 60%. Seth 54%. Carmella 72%. Corbin 60%. If you want a wrestler to rise up the card, it helps to book them to win more matches than they lose. And by 2012, even the cash-ins were failing. After John Cena had become only the second person ever to announce their shot in advance and follow through with it, he fought CM Punk for the WWE Championship at Raw 1000. But Big Show lamely caused a DQ, meaning although Cena won, the title didn't change hands. Damien Sandow would win the briefcase in 2013 and also failed to successfully cash it in against Cena, but Orton, who won the WWE Championship shot, would cash in to great effect on a down Daniel Bryan at SummerSlam, birthing the Authority storyline. Thankfully, after 5 years of oversaturation, cash-in fails and winners getting beat, the Money in the Bank gimmick was about to get an era-defining winner. The single match pay-per-view era 2014 to 2016. In December 2013, the WWE and World Heavyweight Championships were unified into the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. It meant that after an average of 2.25 Money in the Bank matches per year for the last half-decade, WWE would return to one briefcase that could be cashed in on any belt, not just the contract-specified one. In a demonstration of Hempel's paradox, though, that not all ladder matches on Money in the Bank shows are Money in the Bank matches, the 2014 show's main event was for Bryan's vacated belt, which Cena won. LOL. Instead, the Money in the Bank briefcase provided the first real chapter in the Shield's post-breakup story. Seth Rollins had just betrayed the Shield 4 weeks earlier and overcame Ambrose to win the ladder match, thanks to Authority help. He would memorably hold his shot until the following year's WrestleMania 31 for perhaps the most famous cash-in of all time, the first ever at Mania, when Rollins joined the Brock Lesnar vs Roman Reigns main event and won the WWE Championship in the heist of the century. Money in the Bank had perfectly interwoven everything it was supposed to do: have a great ladder match, set up an incredible surprise moment, and catapult a talent into the main event. It was the best total execution since Edge won the first briefcase a decade prior, with the added layer of Seth betraying Roman again. According to Seth, in true architect style, it was his idea. He had been pitching his Mania cash-in since coming up with it in the car with Cesaro, but he didn't find out that WWE was going to go with it until the WrestleMania show itself, after he had already lost to Orton earlier in that night. Unfortunately, WWE forgot about everything that worked for the 2015 contract. Sheamus unhooked the briefcase in June, lost in the first round of a tournament for the vacant world title that November, and cashed in on the newly crowned champion Roman Reigns at Survivor Series. He would then form one of the worst factions of the 2010s, the League of Nations, with Del Rio, Rusev, and King Barrett, and lose the title on Raw 22 days later. Dean Ambrose's 2016 win was far better, telling a contained story in one night rather than stretching Chekhov's briefcase out over the next year. Having won the briefcase 2 matches earlier, he cashed in on Seth, who had himself just won the WWE title from Roman in the main event, meaning that on the 19th of June 2016, all 3 members of the Shield held the top title within the same half-hour period. 2 years after their first real in-ring clash in a Money in the Bank 2014 match, Ambrose had got the ultimate revenge on Seth by cashing in on him. But a new innovation in Money in the Bank was on the horizon, because in 2017, WWE invented women. But before I get onto that, this video is made possible by our amazing members at patreon.com/WrestleTalk. These documentaries take a lot of resources and money to make, and we couldn't do it without your support. But you don't just get our good vibes if you sign up, you get exclusive videos too, like mine and Luke's 20-hour plus deep dive into the breakup of The Shield and everything that was going on in WWE in that crazy year of 2014. That's patreon.com/WrestleTalk. Sign up to get that now. The Men and Women's Era 2017 to 2022. Following WWE dropping the Divas branding the previous April, one of their first major milestones was 2017's Women's Money in the Bank ladder match, which has been staged every year since. And almost in a meta-commentary on women's achievement, the first one was won by a man. In a heavily choreographed match, Carmella beat Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Natalya and Tamina because her valet, James Ellsworth, unhooked the briefcase and dropped it to her. The fan backlash that a bloke won the first ever Women's Money in the Bank match was so fierce, WWE reluctantly did a do-over on the next episode of SmackDown. General Manager Daniel Bryan stripped Carmella of the briefcase and she won it back, Ellsworth free. Carmella cashed in on Charlotte on the post-Mania SmackDown after a record-setting wait of 287 days. While her resulting title reign was confused, holding the briefcase for so long established her as a TV act. The same can't be said for that year's men's winner, Baron Corbin, who had one of the worst cash-ins yet, tripping over the middle rope whilst handing over the briefcase to get rolled up by Jinder Mahal. The first men's and women's year, though, wasn't at full strength, as only SmackDown wrestlers could compete. 2017's was the only ever brand-exclusive Money in the Bank, with the brand split reintroduced the previous July, and they could only cash in on the SmackDown belts. Brand-exclusive pay-per-view stopped with Fastlane 2018, so Money in the Bank could realise its full potential with talent from both Raw and SmackDown the year after. 2018 was the year of Team Little Big, the short-lived but much-loved pairing of Braun Strowman and Alexa Bliss on WWE's Mixed Match Challenge show for Facebook. Bliss won the women's match and cashed in on Nia Jax that same night, a smart total opposite to Carmella's 10-month wait the previous year. Braun Strowman wasn't so lucky, proving the longer you held the briefcase, the more opportunities WWE had to screw up your booking. Strowman lamely defended his contract against Kevin Owens at SummerSlam in a 2-minute squash, finally cashed in to get a match with Roman at Hell in a Cell, which ended in a no contest due to interference from Lesnar. That's right, a Hell in a Cell match with a Money in the Bank cash-in ended in a no contest. Strowman's briefcase was never heard of again for one of the most underwhelming payoffs in the stipulation's history. What are you doing?
I'm fixing the light bulb like you asked!
Why is Pete in here too now? Just like Bliss, Bayley would win and cash in her briefcase on the same show in 2019, beating Charlotte Flair for her newly won SmackDown Women's Championship, because you gotta get those Charlotte reigns up. Despite making her WWE's first ever Women's Grand Slam winner, she entered an awful feud with Alexa and Nikki Cross. Bayley had to turn heel 5 months later to revive her character. The 2019 men's briefcase, however, was bad from the start. Usually, no matter how badly the winner is booked afterwards, the actual ladder match is fun, but that changed when Brock Lesnar won a match he wasn't even a part of, just strolling down at the end of the match while Mustafa Ali was frozen unhooking the briefcase to take it for himself. He turned the briefcase into a boombox, which was actually very good, cashed in on Rollins, held the title for 28 days, and lost it back to Rollins. The 2020 Money in the Bank match came at a time of peak WWE insanity. Diagnosed with pandemic madness and the infuriatingly backwards tagline, "The risk is worth the reward," both the men and women's Money in the Bank matches happened at the same time as a race from the bottom of WWE's global headquarters all the way up to the roof, where a ring was set up with the briefcase hanging above it, in a cinematic match. was the style at the time. There were badly done cameos, like a dude who isn't Doink the Clown, and Stephanie McMahon clearly filming her parts from a totally different location on a totally different day. There was no commentary or audience noise, meaning the main sounds are everyone's shoes squeaking on the floor. And Baron Corbin tried to commit murder not once, but twice, by throwing both Rey Mysterio and Aleister Black off the top of the building. When they appeared on the very next show totally fine, commentary explained they landed on a smaller roof beneath the bigger roof. It's a meta modern-day masterpiece, and we will never see its likes again. The winners were unique too. Asuka won the women's briefcase, but it wasn't a contract locked inside. Apparently in a shoot, Becky Lynch genuinely surprised Asuka on the next day's Raw, revealing she was vacating the belt because she was pregnant, and Asuka had actually won her Raw Women's Championship. As for the men's, it was AJ Styles and Corbin who unhooked the briefcase, but they both dropped it into Otis's arms, making him the winner, with Michael Cole adding a kayfabe new rule saying it's the person in control of the contract at the end of the match. Whatever that means. WWE never really had any plans for Otis though, and he became the second person ever to lose the briefcase before cashing it in. Miz won it from him at Hell in a Cell, incorrectly cashed it in at December's TLC because John Morrison handed it over rather than him, to correctly cash it in on Drew McIntyre at Elimination Chamber. 2021 had Nikki Cross win as her almost a superhero gimmick, which she cashed in the following night on, you guessed it, Edge. You guessed it, Charlotte Flair. Her gimmick never got over. She was booked as a weak champion and she lost it back to Flair at SummerSlam. Big E's was on the more successful end, becoming the first African-American winner, but proving themselves as an equally crap opportunities employer, WWE booked him in a feud over Baron Corbin stealing his briefcase. Big E announced in advance he would be cashing in after the Randy Orton vs Bobby Lashley September 13th Raw main event, which he successfully did, but a worthy reign became a victim of circumstance. On WWE's Day 1 show to open 2022, Roman Reigns tested positive for COVID-19, scrapping the planned main event of Reigns vs Lesnar. WWE added Brock to Big E's title match, making it a 5-way, meaning plenty of other people for Lesnar to pin, but Brock pinned Big E clean instead. Big E would later say his run did little for him, arguing it's difficult for fans to believe in a new champion when, within their first month, they have multiple losses on TV, and how, just like Kofi Kingston, he was buried at the hands of one Brock Lesnar, and then suddenly it feels like you woke up a year prior and you're back to doing what you were doing before. 2022 saw Liv Morgan do the now annual tradition of cashing in the women's briefcase within a 24-hour period, beating Ronda Rousey on the same night. She was then booked as a weak champion, clearly tapping out to Ronda during their SummerSlam rematch. But it was much worse for Austin Theory, who would not only go on to lose a ridiculous 84% of his subsequent matches, the highest ever loss rate of any briefcase holder ever, who not only became the first person ever to choose to cash in on a mid-card belt, Seth Rollins' United States Championship, worst of all, he failed. Rollins retained. Liv and Theory's runs felt like loose ends to be tied up, because 20 days after Money in the Bank 2022, Vince McMahon was forced out of WWE. Liv and Theory's wins were some of the last major creative decisions he had made before he left. We were about to enter the Paul Levesque era. The Paul Levesque era 2022 to the present. Triple H and Nick Khan could now realise their vision of professional wrestling, which can be summed up in two traits: long records and overseas shows. Money in the Bank 2023 became the first international edition of the pay-per-view, taking place from the O2 in London, England. I know this because some buses still have the posters on 2 years later. The women's ladder match, which was the best of the night, saw Io Sky win the briefcase, who waited a whole month to cash in, which is a year in WWE's women's division terms. And the men's match was won by Damian Priest, who both became the longest ever men's holder of the briefcase at 281 days, and the second person ever to cash in at WrestleMania, with an expertly executed angle on night 2 of Mania 40, when Drew McIntyre, who had just won, trash-talked CM Punk and was laid out. The Money in the Bank stipulation felt like it was becoming important again. After almost 20 years...
I've got it! I've got it! I've got it. After almost 20 years, despite bad luck, worse booking, and failed pushes, Money in the Bank is still one of the greatest wrestling stipulations of all time. There's way more great ladder matches than there are bad ones. The winners, at least for a fleeting moment, feel like they're going to be WWE's next biggest star. And no matter how bad the title reign is afterwards, or even if the title's never won to begin with, the cash-in. Cash-in's always special. Because with Money in the Bank, there's more than just a contract in the briefcase. There's hope.
God damn it, Luke, stop reading my teleprompter! If you enjoyed this cursed history of Money in the Bank, go watch our epic, insane history of the Roman Reigns Bloodline saga by clicking the video on screen now. And please join patreon.com/WrestleTalk, where you can watch Luke and I do a 20-hour plus deep dive on the 2014 breakup of The Shield.